want to thank all of our sponsors who support all of the programming that we do. I know the WTTW folks are well aware of this. You know that they underwrite all of this programming, and so we are so grateful. We want to thank all of you, and especially our host today, Sidley. Thank you so much for being our generous host this evening. You'll notice a QR code on the program at your seat. Scan this, you'll get a digital version of the program for today. You can learn more about the event and also instructions on submitting questions to our speakers. Hopefully it works. I know they'll try to get to as many as they can, although they have plenty that they want to cover on their own, but please submit your questions. You type exec to 22333, and then you'll get a prompt and you can submit them. And please check out all of our other upcoming programs. Today is phenomenal. We have a lot of really exciting programs coming up, so check out our website. We welcome all of you, members and non-members alike. We are here to serve the entire Chicago business community, so you're all welcome. Particularly, I just want to highlight on November 3rd, we have the CEOs of Portillo's and Levy talking about brands, and we're serving Portillo's. It's going to be a lot of fun. So at the very least, come and get some Portillo's. So thank you once again. I now would like to introduce my dear friend, Chris Abenante. A little background, we went to high school together, didn't see each other for 27 years, and then ran into each other, and then all of this happened. And I don't think as two middle-class kids growing up in the western suburbs, we ever thought that we'd be here introducing the CEO of PBS. I mean, it's been such a formative part of all of our childhoods, and this is just really special. So thank you, Chris.
Margaret is the only person with a PhD that went to my high school. I can guarantee you that. So thank you, and thank you all for being here today. I'm Chris Abenante, as Margaret mentioned. I'm a partner here at Sidley and a proud board member of WTTW and WFMT. This evening, I am honored to introduce my colleague, Newt Minow, who will be sharing a bit more about tonight's speaker with us shortly. I first met Newt because of our mutual admiration for the University of Notre Dame. I'm an alum, and he's a longtime life trustee and a longtime friend and advisor to Father Hesburgh. For those of you who know a little bit about Notre Dame, Father Hesburgh is the reason Notre Dame is the institution it is today, and because he surrounded himself with people like Newt. Newt is a longtime leader at Sidley and was instrumental in making Sidley a preeminent institution in Chicago and a leading global law firm. Among other things, Newt is a World War II veteran, a Supreme Court clerk, a counselor to Illinois Governor and presidential candidate Adlai Stevenson. In 1961, President Kennedy appointed him chairman of the FCC, where he rose to prominence with his often quoted vast wasteland speech. Newt has served on many boards for many civic organizations and public companies, including Sara Lee, Aon, CBS, and Tribune. He's the recipient of 14 honorary degrees, and among his many awards and recognition, he received the Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama in 2016. Through his efforts at the FCC, his role as a founder and chairman of PBS, and his involvement at WTTW, his impact on public television cannot be overstated. In honoring him, WTTW published a statement that said, "Public television would not exist in its current form without Newt." But perhaps most importantly, he is a friend and mentor to many in this room, including me. He's always been a devoted family man. He and his equally remarkable late wife, Jo, to whom he was married for 72 years, are the proud parents of 3 very accomplished daughters, including one who is here with us today. So please join me in welcoming Newt.
Thank you, Chris. I'm so pleased that you're carrying on our tradition in serving with WTTW and WFMT. As Chris said, welcome to Sidley. Our firm has been in this city for almost 160 years. Its early client was Mary Lincoln, and so we've been around a long time. and I've been privileged to be here for about a third of it. When President Kennedy was elected in 1960, he asked me to become chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. I went to Washington from Chicago, where I was very familiar with WTTW. President Kennedy went to the White House from Boston, where he was very familiar with WGBH. We were very surprised when we learned there was no public television station in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. There was no public television station in New York, the nation's biggest city. There was no public television station in Los Angeles, the second biggest city. There was no public television in most places, and we decided to try to remedy that. And today, I'm very proud to say, as Paula will tell you, we have more than 300 public television stations throughout the United States. A decade or so ago, Paula became the president, chief executive officer of PBS. She came there from a career at WNET, the public television station in New York. She has done a truly spectacular job. And I leave you with one thought. Today, when people are asked, when public opinion polls are to pick which is the most trusted institution in America, every time that is taken, PBS comes out number one. And that is largely due to the fine work that Paula does. And I'm so glad that Bill Curtis, who is the kind of broadcast newsman who always reports in facts, not with misinformation, and is probably the best in his business. And Bill is going to interview Paula. Thank you.
How's that for an introduction?
I think that's a great introduction.
I think we could retire.
I think
right
we can.
And call it a good night. It's so nice to be here with you.
It's great to be here with you, Bill. Don't you love Bill's voice? Couldn't you just sit in this room and listen to him forever? Yeah. Which I do on Saturdays, by the way.
Oh, good,
Yeah.
good. Wait, don't tell me.
Wait.
You see the kind of audience. Incidentally, I was going to say it's wonderful to be here in the house that Newt built.
Yes, it is.
We're going to want to get. Oh, I'm sorry. I should explain to you. This will bring all your questions to me immediately. So I'm going to try and work them into our conversation. So fire away. I want to know about you. Where did you start and get the idea for PBS and even before that?
Yep. And I want to come back to my friend Newt Minow in a little bit as well, because he was a great part of this journey. I grew up outside of Baltimore and in an area that now is more developed, but the time I grew up was rural. And so for me, public broadcasting, particularly public television, was important. It opened my mind and encouraged me to think about things that I was not seeing close to me. But I had another connection to public broadcasting, which is my grandfather, who had worked on missile defense systems during World War II using microwave technology. When he got out of the war, had this idea and petitioned the government for some surplus equipment. And at the school where he taught, he put up a public radio station using a transmitter that he had gotten out of the Department of the Army. And so he was responsible for WBJC, which is now, it's actually the classical music station in Baltimore. But he did it because he was a professor and was teaching physics. And this was a real world application for microwave technology, which was then the way that radio was transmitted. I'm telling you stuff that you know very well. I'm talking to a radio guy and I'm explaining how radio works. Anyway.
Oh, but I love it. Now I finally understand.
Now you understand. So I grew up with, public radio being my grandfather's station. But I never thought that this was where I would end up with my career. I was a classic underachiever. I went to college with this idea that I was going to be a doctor and then failed organic chemistry and so realized I would not be a doctor. And took a lot of humanities courses because I loved them. I was interested in literature and art history, and I took comparative religion, and then panicked that I would never be gainfully employed, therefore never able to leave my parents' home, which I was motivated to do. And so I ended up getting a degree in business just because I thought, again, no great plan, but I thought at least I could get a job. And so with my newly minted business degree, I really hadn't a clue. And I did what people did at that time, which is I looked in the want ads and I started interviewing different places. And I happened to interview for a job working for UNICEF. Now, it was a bit of an epiphany for me. My family had been very involved in volunteer organizations my whole life. When I was really little, my grandmother took me door to door with the Heart Fund, which was mortifying, going to doors, asking people for money. Little did I know how well that would pay off for me later. But I realized, and again, as a 21, 22-year-old, it feels like a ridiculous moment to realize that there actually was a whole sector of people that worked at nonprofit organizations. And I got this job at UNICEF. And that actually was, and they were interested in me because I had a business degree and my interest was marketing. And nonprofits at the time, it was when more women were going back in the workforce and they were really looking for people to come in. And that's how I came into the nonprofit world. I worked for UNICEF, started in Washington. They brought me to New York. I ran the national trick-or-treat campaign, Trick or Treat for UNICEF. Those little boxes, they still exist. Maybe some came to your house recently. And then from there, I worked at a organization that was run by the Rockefeller family called International House. The whole idea was to bring people together that had come to this country studying with Americans so that, and these are all graduate students, so the whole idea was these are people that would go back to significant roles in their countries and their communities, as well as Americans that would go into significant roles, and just a small way of trying to bring people together. From there, I got a job at the Metropolitan Opera. Tell me this isn't as crazy. And that
what did you sing?
Yes, well, that would send everyone running out of this room, but I raised money for them. So see, the money raising door to door was a good thing. And one day working there, I got a call from a headhunter saying, would you be interested in coming to work in public broadcasting, Channel 13, WNET. And that's how I got into public broadcasting. And that was, I'm 17 years almost in this job, 13 years there. So that was 30 years ago. And it stuck. I loved, I first went to WNET to help them raise big money. And then I became the station manager. The then president thought that I had talent that I didn't see in myself. This is undercurrent in my career as well. Surrounding yourself with people that identify things in yourself you don't see. And from there, I was tapped to come to PBS, and I've been in this job for 17 years.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
That is wonderful. Mentors along the way. Now, your grandfather was one, but
he was one.
You must have run into some wonderful people.
And, you know, it's interesting. When I talk to young people today who are trying to figure out their careers, one, I always tell them the organic chemistry story. I've had the privilege of giving some college commencements. My husband always says to me, please don't tell that story again. But it's an important story because kids believe that if they make a mistake or something doesn't quite work out the way they think it should, that their life is over, that somehow everyone around them has their life figured out. And the reality is most of us don't. For most of us, this journey, Newt is accepted from this story, but most of the rest of us human beings really are trying to figure it out as we go. And I think the other thing that is important is you sometimes end up in places you never thought. And if it's the journey, not always the destination. And so being willing to try things and explore. And then the other part of that is finding extraordinary people that you learn from. So I've worked with some great people. I've worked with some not great people. I think you learn sometimes more from the not great bosses than the great ones. But I've had a couple people in my life who have been tremendously important in public media, two in particular. One was a man by the name of Ward Chamberlain. Ward Chamberlain was the person who was the president of WETA, not the first, but I think the second, Newt, is that right? He's either the second or the third. And he after he had retired, he was doing some work at Channel 13 and really took me under his wing. And I think I became the station manager because he mentored me and helped me see that I could do more than just ask people for money, as honorable a profession as that is. The other person that I have always looked up to is Newt Minow. So now I will tell my Newt story. In 2006, I was named president of PBS, and first-time CEO, and I had been, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months in the job, and I got a phone call from Newt Minow's office. Mr. Minow would like to meet with you. Could you please come to Chicago? My heart stopped. Newt Minow was calling me. Oh my gosh. So I came to Chicago. He had me meet him at the Drake, and I was really afraid because he is the great man that all of us in public broadcasting are always, we're trying to live up to his expectations of what this public media system should be. He was the one that really, and he described it well, there were a couple stations in a couple places, but the power of the system was something that he understood. This organization that is local and national. And so I went up to the apartment, I met Jo. That's when I knew that things were gonna be okay, because I liked her a lot. I thought this is gonna be fine. And then it was time to go to dinner, and Jo said, well, you're gonna be going next door for dinner. And then my heart sunk again. It's like, oh, I'm gonna be alone with Newt. And I just didn't wanna mess up, which in fact was the message that he wanted to impart to me. When we sat down, he said, I wanted to meet with you because you know how important this job is. And I said, yes, I do. And he said, you cannot mess this up. And for 17 years, I've been trying to honor that commitment that I made to you that night, that I'm going to do my best not to mess this up. But I think that those that inspire us are those that, as Newt does, periodically sends notes about things that he thinks we've done well, or occasionally things that we have messed up. We don't get it. We don't bat 1,000. But also people whose work is an inspiration. I think for many of us in public broadcasting, I'll speak for Sandra Misek, who I know you'll hear from a little later, we recognize that we stand on the shoulders of giants. We recognize that there were people that came before us that built these great organizations, that had the vision and the idea, in our case, that media could be something more than just entertainment, but that when we really hit our mark is educational and inspirational, that has the possibility to help children see a world like I did when I was growing up, that was not outside my backyard, but that had me think about ideas that I never dreamed were possible, that bring joy to people that maybe don't get out as much anymore, that helps to, what we're focused on right now in particular, help to knit this country together, help us to understand each other, our collective history. All of that was part of what was envisioned when this organization was created. And so I think for people like Newt, who have been such an extraordinary, not only role model, but have stayed engaged over the years and have prompted us to really think about what we should be doing to continue to evolve and be relevant for audiences to come is really, has made all the difference for me. So yes, mentors are extraordinarily important.
And never more important than today.
I think never more important than today.
I think just to set you up a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I think that you are closer to the community than all the commercial stations. They're commercial. They're
Well,
in it
it's
for
not
money.
just that. They're local. So I have spent 17 years visiting. I've not visited every single one of our stations, but almost all of them. I've been to every state in the country. Hawaii was the last, by the way, in 2019. How stupid was that? I waited till 2019 to go to Hawaii. I've been to Scranton 3 times. I've been to Hawaii once.
Which do you like best?
I like Scranton, actually. But the point of it is that in a time when most media is not truly local, our public television stations are locally owned, they're locally operated, they're locally governed, and it's why we're trusted. Because you tend to trust your local friends, your neighbors, maybe not so much those people across the country that may not understand you as well. And I think that's particularly happened in media when you see important stories where people will parachute into communities and they'll file a story. They may not fully understand it, but they'll get the facts as well as they can, and then they'll leave. In public broadcasting, our content comes to us from our stations, and we are in every community, and I think that matters a lot. And so every once in a while, I will call Newt, and because it is complicated running an organization like PBS, none of these stations report to me. I actually report to them. It's like a co-op flipped upside down. I mean, so what we try to do at PBS, we create the programming, we create the infrastructure so that the programming is delivered to stations, we create the educational resources, which are significant. We deliver content to more than 3 million teachers a month, free material that's delivered via broadband into classrooms. All of the work that we can do at scale is what PBS does, so that stations can focus on what they do, which is, that no one else can do, which is tell local stories and to bring the national content and make it relevant locally. It is a complicated organization to run. It's a federated system. So I have a lot of responsibility, not ultimate authority. And so more than once, and Newt will tell you, I have called him and said, can you remind me again what you were thinking when you set this up? This organization that is so diffused in many ways, and particularly now when media is shifting so much and we're trying to figure out how to be on the new platforms and get stations to, to come along and to make decisions that are hard. To move from just a broadcaster, you control everything, to working with these other partners. These are hard things to do. And then to do that across the entire country. But ultimately, he had it 100% right. This idea that we have local, powerful media organizations that all come together with a sense of common purpose is the most powerful system that we could have in this country, and it serves us extraordinarily well.
So we're proud of you and the work you have done. Newt said it. Suddenly there is chaos among broadcasters. Nobody knows what's going on. You have streaming. They don't know whether to get into streaming. Then they'll shut down a whole channel. Advertisers are leaving them. It was once a business to print money, and now it is not. And yet, you, NPR, perhaps by design, but as much by accident, find yourself in the safe spot of a stable business who is loyal to what you do and have done all these years. And people come to you for that. So
But it's not by accident, because the reason that we're in the position that we are is that we never forget who we are. And I think where companies, so this isn't just relevant to public broadcasting, I think where companies get into trouble is they forget those values and that core that defines who you are. And what we have tried to do over the years is we evolve and we change. We're a very different organization than we were when I first became the CEO, and certainly 30 years ago when I first came into public media. But those attributes of public media that matter, creating content that isn't just entertainment, but that has, I used to refer to it as content of consequence, the content that actually makes a difference in people's lives. It would be tempting to, do things just because they were popular to get an audience. But that's not why we were created. We were created to do those things that the marketplace could not fulfill. And we've tried not to forget that. That's where I think, we have been able to, even in this very tumultuous time, continue to endure and to attract contributions and to attract people to the work that we're doing, because we haven't forgotten that basic fact.
Yeah. Let me put a problem to you, find out how you're going to solve it. The western portion of the United States is running out of water. New York Times has called it unlivable already. And at one time, the deadline was, by the end of the century. Then it's to 2030. You may have 150,000 homes wiped away by rising sea levels caused by the melting ice caps in Antarctica and Greenland, all the glaciers. Glaciers are gone, essentially, and they will be gone if they're not invisible right now. So here is a massive Armageddon kind of a problem. How are you going to sweep across the entire network and solve it?
I didn't think I would be answering the question, Paula, how are you solving climate change? But I'll take a swing at a part of the question. It was a bit of a setup because we were in this conversation earlier. I think very carefully about, again, about coming back to my point of what makes us different than the rest of the media. I always use this line that we use the same tools as commercial media, we're just in a profoundly different business. As we look at where we can put our time and effort, this is one of the topics that I think we can do a lot to bring conversations forward, to bring solutions forward for people to think about and consider. You said a few minutes ago, we're trusted. We are. There are generations of people that grew up watching Sesame Street. There are generations of people that support their local stations. We reach children. We reach classrooms. We reach adults, both during the day and in prime time. And we have an opportunity to bring stories forward. And we have a long track record of producing content in this area. Series like Nature and Nova, we've done a lot of work in natural history. We've done a lot of work in science. We've done a lot of work already in climate. We have an extraordinary news gathering organization in the NewsHour. We have the greatest investigative journalism series on television, Frontline. And if you take all of those assets and think about bringing stories forward about climate in a way that we are bringing everyone into the conversation, that's the contribution that PBS can make. And I think that thus far, I think there are those that would listen to what you just said and head directly to the bar because we have trashed our world and there is nothing left to be done. I don't believe that. And I know that there are many that do not believe that. And so in addition to focusing on climate, what we're also focused on is our solutions. And I think the more that we can bring solutions forward so that people can see in both small and larger ways that there is work that we can do individually and collectively as communities, that will make a big difference. So I don't know that, I'm not suggesting for a moment that we will solve the climate challenges ourselves, but I'd like to be part of the solution.
Individuals will think of the solutions.
Individuals will.
And will get us out of this.
Yeah.
But they have to all know the problem, and that's up to all of us as broadcasters.
Right. Yeah.
I have another one. Why is diversity important?
Well, we are a media organization that is for all, and so we should reflect all. And I think if you look back at the history of public broadcasting, you look at everyone from, Maria on Sesame Street to Charlene Hunter-Gault on the NewsHour. There is a long history in public broadcasting. I'm not the first woman to be the president of PBS. In fact, there are many women that have been both in front of and behind the cameras that have really changed television, from Julia Child to Paula Apsel, who was the producer of Nova, Rebecca Eaton, producer of Masterpiece Theater, Rainey Aronson now is executive producer of Frontline. I can reel off the names of of many people who have had significant roles, and it matters who tells the story, and it matters who controls the stories that are told. And so it has been a priority of public broadcasting, even more so over the last few years. After the murder of George Floyd, when many organizations were and individuals were forced to look very carefully at themselves, and I think for PBS, even harder because we have this great history, so we're the good guys, right? But are we as good as we could be or should be? Probably not. And so for us, we have really focused specifically on, obviously our staff, but also the programs that we produce, the producers that we work with, the producers that we're supporting, not just new producers, but also producers who are working their second, third, fourth films that struggle to bring them forward. We focus on the relationships that we have with other vendors. We focus on governance. I mean, there are lots of pieces of this to think about, and it makes us a stronger, richer organization by focusing on the country we are, not the country that we used to be.
Yeah, you've done well. I'm going to go to Google, just to prove to you that this works. And if you'll notice, a good producer volunteered to bring it up here.
Yeah,
so
I saw
now
that.
that we know.
Yeah.
Of all the transformational moments in your career, what is a moment or challenge that tested you and how you were changed as a result?
I think probably the biggest challenge, and I think anyone at any company could come up and answer the same question and would probably have a similar answer, and that would be the last few years. I have, we all have our collective experiences of how we've run organizations or run departments or whatever leadership role that we've had, but nothing really prepared, certainly me, for these last few years, where in a period of literally days, we went from an organization that had always had largely people in the office to one that was almost fully remote. We didn't even have laptops for everyone. And I think that the challenges of that period, and I think for a leader in particular, where your inclination, I think, always is to not just move an organization forward, but encourage all of the people that work with you. None of us had any answers, and we were making up as we went. In the case of public broadcasting, I said to our stations as well as to our staff, I think we were built for this moment. The then head of the LA Unified School System, a guy by the name of Austin Butner, had reached out to me in early February and said, I'm watching this situation with this new virus, and I'm worried that we may be in a position where we'll send kids home. He happened to run one of the two public television stations in Los Angeles, and he said, I think that station could be part of solution for the kids that'll be home. Can you help me? And we pulled together a few stations in Los Angeles, which began, and building on what we were doing via broadband, began the basis of some at-home learning that stations across the country then took and ramped up, and really became a significant part of the work we did during COVID. We also were looking carefully at making sure that people were getting accurate information at a time when that seemed hard to get. Where do you go for trusted information? Again, PBS. We also looked at bringing in programming that would be diversion. There was no, if you remember, in the first months of COVID, the baseball season did not start. We brought back Ken Burns' baseball series. It wasn't quite the same, but it felt like a step. We had all of this arts programming in the archives. We brought all of that back. And so I think that, but that period taught me a lot. I couldn't tell the people that worked with me that it was going to be okay because I didn't know that. I didn't know what was going to happen. I worked with one of our largest funders who allowed us to repurpose some grants so that we could buy all the laptops and that we could put some resources aside, because I didn't even know that our stations would all make it. This was before the federal government started issuing grants, and some of our stations took advantage of that. the need to communicate and to communicate and to communicate. You would think someone in media would be brilliant at communicating within organizations, but we don't always remember that you have to say things overly and consistently for people to hear it and believe it. And then to create opportunities for people to talk about what they were going through, to figure out how we were going to manage people who weren't in an office but were dispersed. It was a very, and we are going through this major media transformation. Oh, in the middle of it, we were celebrating our 50th anniversary. So what the good part of all of this is that I think it allowed all of us to be much more nimble. We were able to do things we never thought we would do. No, I never thought Judy Woodruff would be doing the NewsHour from her house. You know, it just seemed crazy, right? I mentioned our 50th anniversary. We had planned the stuff you do for 50th anniversaries, these retrospectives, all the stuff. We sort of scrapped all of it. It felt silly and indulgent and off at a moment when people were really struggling. But what we did do is CBS Sunday Morning did a piece for us, and I was supposed to interview with them at the beginning of COVID. It didn't happen, so we did it remotely. This is CBS. So they sent me instructions, and they said they would interview me using my cell phone for broadcast. And by that point, we were becoming accustomed to seeing things that looked a little different on air. And they sent me instructions on how to set it up myself. You know, so prior to COVID, I would have gone into one of their studios, and they would have had great makeup and lighting, none of which I had. I did have a ring light, so that helped. And they sent me instructions on how to set up my camera, including how to use a Kleenex box as a tripod. Now, I would have thought CBS would have sent me a tripod, you know. So here's important information for you to know. So you use the boutique size, and if you shove it in there, you know, sort of sideways, and you have to flip it around because it's not the selfie side that's the good camera, it's the other side. You probably know this already, right? And my hack to it is if you put a mirror behind, I used a hand mirror, if you use a mirror behind, then you can see what you look like, because you can't see yourself if you're not using the selfie side. And it aired on national television, and it looked great. Now, it sounds like a silly story, but the thing is, I think of all the things that we always held ourselves back, oh, we can't do that because we're PBS, we're quality, and we're this and that. But sometimes, you know what? A camera, I mean, your cell phone stuffed in a Kleenex box is actually pretty darn good. Yeah. And if it allows you to capture a moment that's important. And so what we've been trying to do is we've been, you know, sort of returning back to whatever the state is now. The fact that we can all be in a room together is pretty great. Is that not to forget the stuff that, or at least that thought that you can do things that seem weird and out there, and the consequence may not be bad. In fact, it actually may turn out to be pretty good.
And it has a great edge to it. I prefer, you know, real to lots of makeup and lights. Darwin said that, you know, success doesn't go to the smartest or the strongest, but to the one who is quickest to adapt.
That's it.
And that's exactly what we have to do.
And we just kept shifting every step of the way, you know, and we would learn how to do some things and we try other stuff. But I do feel that, again, as organizations, and I will get on my soapbox in a minute about this period we're in now, because I do believe, I was just in New York. Our offices are in Northern Virginia, so I'm in D.C. a lot. I was just in Cincinnati, Denver, and St. Louis. And many cities I'm visiting are really struggling because people are not in their offices. Yeah. And there was a poignant piece in the Washington Post from 2 days ago about Union Station, which was having challenges prior to COVID, and now because government workers are not fully back, and this may be unpopular, but I'm going to say how I feel. I'm not expecting our staff at PBS to be in the office 5 days a week, but I want to see them at least half the time. And I think that the consequence of everyone retreating, we can talk about, you know, people feeling isolated and all of that, but I think the other consequence is the impact that it's having on our cities and our communities. Restaurants, small businesses, arts organizations that really rely on people being together. And so this is an executive leaders group. So that's why you invited me. So I'm going to say my piece and you cannot invite me ever back again. But I do believe that we all need to play a role in trying to get people back. And I think that it's...
Other CEOs are speaking up and saying the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel completely alone here, but it's just, I see it because I've now visited so many places where you can just see that that there is a whole economy of businesses that will not survive, and our country will be profoundly changed if we don't step up and do something about it.
Let's talk about money. You get 15% of your funding from the government.
Our system does. Yes, our system does. So if you take the economy of all of our stations, again, this was another idea of yours, I think. If you take all of our stations together, 15% of the economy of public broadcasting comes from the federal government. Most of that money goes to our stations, and it goes to support the infrastructure. And the whole idea behind it, which actually was brilliant, is that you want to make sure, and this was part of what LBJ thought about when he signed the Public Broadcasting Act and helped really create the network of PBS. There were stations, as Newt suggested earlier, that had started up around the country, but there was no real network until the signing of the Public Broadcasting Act and the work of people like Newt and others that created the structure of PBS. But the idea was that you wanted stations in communities that could afford them and ones that also would need a little support. And so the idea is that for those stations, we have an extraordinary station in Cookeville, Tennessee. It has a small staff. Probably 60% of its revenue comes from the federal government. There would be no public broadcasting station in Cookeville, Tennessee. In fact, there are no commercial stations in Cookeville, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Nearest broadcaster is in Nashville. And a lot of people in that community watch television over the air with antennas outside. And so the idea of having that money that stations use to support their infrastructure, I don't know what it is for TTW, it's probably, about 9%, 8%, 7%, 5%, pick a number. It's small, it's smallish, because this is a community that can support the station. And so that's the whole idea. We're an interdependent system. And the rest of the money comes from, different places, but the largest support is viewers like you. So here's the wind-up for the big pitch. And that really, I think, is also part of where the trust comes from. Because I look at the other public broadcasters around the world, most of them are state-funded. The BBC is an extraordinary broadcaster, but the money comes to them from taxes on television sets. And so I think that the idea that people would, dig down in their pockets and give money to their local public broadcasting stations, who do you give to? You give to organizations you trust. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the structure of this actually was brilliant, because the idea that people would contribute into this thing in their community that has value, stations have to constantly work at proving their value in order to ensure that those monies come forward.
We have always heard that Chicago funds WTTW better than almost any other city in the country.
I think that's true. I think that's true. And carries
with it a lot of clout. I want to hear your pitch. It doesn't have to be long, or go back through the years. And, we'll use Sidley as an example. There's so much advertising for lawyers, on the air that they need some advertising. Yeah. Why should they buy time, if they can, on WTTW or even a network?
Well, they're not buying time. They're sponsoring work on public broadcasting, which is something that signals their commitment to the community they serve and quality, which is what we represent. A lot of organizations support us because they care about the communities in which their employees work and live and their customers work and live. They care about being associated with an organization that is focused on content that matters, and that association has a profound halo effect. And by the way, we reach a significant number of people in this community. So this isn't just a pure philanthropic effort, although of course there is a philanthropic component. 80% of the people in this community are watching the station. And so it is seen by quite a few people who will note, because we don't have tons of ads on our air, that Sidley would then stand out as an organization that cares about Chicago, that is an organization of quality, and their ad would sit there in a way that people will notice.
And to be associated with quality is a very appealing thing.
It is for Sidley, because that's what that law firm represents.
And TTW to be associated with Sidley. How's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
For quality? What's your favorite PBS program?
See, everyone thinks this is the softball question. So, who's your favorite child? You know, I mean, it's the same version of that question. So, you know, our producers are extraordinary people, but they're sensitive, and I don't want to send any into therapy. But, you know, I have come up with an answer to that question because I get asked it more times than you would think. Actually, you would acknowledge, probably a lot of people ask me the question, and that is, what is the program that I think is the most important on our air? And I say Frontline, because there is no other investigative journalism series on television, and I think that the work that they do is profoundly important. I love Ken Burns. I love all of the history work that we produce. I love Skip Gates. I love his series. I love Finding Your Roots. I love, you know, sometimes when I'm just exhausted, I like watching Antiques Roadshow. I like a lot on our air. I love the arts. It's always been important to me. Drama is important. All of it, I think, has a place. But I think the journalism that we do is hugely important. I put NewsHour right behind Frontline, but I think everyone has gotten out of the investigative journalism business more or less. Most of the series that you and I would think of as some of the great series focused on the important issues of our time are now all crime, with the exception of 60 Minutes. And
Guilty.
right, and I do feel that is something more than almost anything else we do that I want to make sure is supported and grows.
Frontline is number one in investigative reporting. Very quick, what will PBS look like in the next 17 years?
Well, right now I'm thinking about the next 3, but because media is shifting so much. So I think, look, the ability to be able to watch whatever you want streamed. If you're a member of TTW, you can be a member of Passport. You have access to it. This isn't a pitch either, but I think Sandra's coming up next. She can make one because I've set her up nicely. Is access to a wide library, but also, free. We have available a lot of content. So we're a broadcaster. I don't see the broadcast business really going away. I have arguments with people all the time. Broadcasting is dead. It's gone. It'll be gone in 5 years. A lot of people watch broadcast. They watch linear television. They don't want to have to pick programs. I sometimes wonder if people that say this watch television. I'm talking about people in media. It's like, do you watch television? You come home every night and you know exactly what you're going to watch? Because I think most people have this experience. You come home, if you have a spouse or someone at home with you, you sit down, and if you're trying to go through a library of programs, an hour later you're still scrolling through, or I wonder what's on PBS tonight, and you turn it on and it runs. And so I think, or other stations that may be your favorite. So I think there's something about having those decisions curated for you. It's not that we're lazy, but there's something magical about serendipity. And so I think that it's and, not or. I think it's wonderful that if you want to see a series that you missed or that someone is talking about, you can look it up. It makes, and the work that we do truly benefits from this environment we're in, because these are evergreen programs that are as relevant when we produce them and sometimes 10 and 20 years later. So having the opportunity to have that accessible really easy, so all you have to do is find it and click and there you go, is great. But it's also great to have things constantly brought forward. So I think there'll be some evolution of that. But I also, what I can tell you for sure is that what I talked about probably 10 or 15 minutes ago about the values and the mission of what we do, that is sacrosanct and that will not change. And that I can speak for now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 17 years from now, because that's the foundation on which we're built.
Good. Ladies and gentlemen, Paula Kerger.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Bill. What a thought-provoking conversation. You know, you have really underscored just how essential PBS and its member stations are here in Chicago with WTTW and in our society and culture in general. So thank you so much. I wanted to also thank Margaret Mueller from the Executive Club for putting on this event. Thank you so much. WTTW and WFMT trustee Chris Abinante from Sidley, thank you again. And of course, I'd like to share my warmest appreciation to Newt Minow. Newt, you are a friend and a trustee emeritus of WTTW and WFMT, and your career and your legacy are all about what Paula just spoke about, which was meeting the moment. So can't thank you enough. I should have mentioned, I'm Sandra Cordova-Misek, President and CEO of Chicago's PBS station here and Classical WFMT. And we're honored to be a part of this event and events like this that really drive thought and action. And, you know, it's a really change-making set of people in this room. And I thank you all really for coming here. Your organizations and your leadership here in Chicago means so much. WTTW strives to make a difference by inviting our audience, as Paula mentioned, to explore and really dive deeper into the ideas and issues that impact the people in our community. And in this effort, we have the pleasure of partnering with Paula and PBS and member stations across the country to meet the moment. So we tell stories of our communities, and we like to talk about it as our purpose: enriching lives, engaging communities, and inspiring exploration. So we're proud of our work. We're proud of our partnership with PBS. And with that, I would say I invite everyone to stay for the reception, excuse me, where we can talk more. And thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you very much.